Don't do starting strength. The average person shouldn't train like a powerlifter. I can't believe that it's 2026 and we still hear this from idiots that have not read the blue book. Or maybe they have read and skimmed it or reddited how to do it, but they didn't actually understand what the point is. And there was a comment below that asked what initially kind of just annoyed me, but then I thought this would be a good question to answer in depth to give you guys a little bit more clarity on why we are so insistent on the main barbell lifts being the best way to build strength, which leads to building muscle in novice trainees. This particular individual asked directly under this post, explain why the average person shouldn't simply do chest presses, pendulum squats, and back extensions instead of bench, deadlift, and squat. Now, again, this is all the rage on X. Everybody trying to optimize. Lots of posts about how weighted back extensions are way better than deadlifts, and pendulum squats and hack squats are way better for hypertrophy than barbell squats, and how chest presses better isolate the chest than bench, and anybody doing the barbell lifts is just a fucking dinosaur now. And this annoyed me, but I figured we would take this as a learning opportunity. And he asked the question to the right barbell autist coach who has had a lot of time to think about this. So, without further ado, why shouldn't the average person simply do chest presses, pendulum squats, and back extensions instead of bench, deadlift, and squat? So, let's talk about why we would use the bench, the deadlift, and the squat to begin with. A couple different things here. If you have a principle behind your training of efficiency, meaning you want to do the most effective training that you can based on what your goal is, and if that goal is getting stronger. Why do we do the barbell lifts? Why are these the exercises that we have chosen to get ourselves stronger? Well, a properly performed bench, deadlift, squat, press, one, utilizes the most muscle mass through the longest effective range of motion. So we can lift the most weight. And when we can lift a bunch of weight, our body is having to produce a bunch of force. And when we do that and progressively load it, we end up getting stronger. Now, the good thing about a barbell also is that it's infinitely loadable. So there's never really a limit of how strong you can get. You're not limited by the implement that you're using there. So it's scalable, it's loadable, it's repeatable, and there's a model to perform them that satisfy those main criteria of utilizing the most muscle mass to the longest effective range of motion so you can lift the most weight. So the dumb way of saying this is the deadlift, normal human movement pattern of picking something up heavy off the floor, utilizes a ton of your muscle mass. But there's an argument to be made that it uses pretty much every single muscle that you have. Similar thing with squats. Bench, also utilizing a ton of the upper body. In fact, there's some full body access there when it comes to bracing and leg drive and all of that there too. So with those movements, you're utilizing all of the muscle mass at once instead of isolating one particular muscle group. Now, the people that argue against this say that, well, because it doesn't isolate anything particularly well, it's not as good for hypertrophy of XYZ muscle groups than something that actually isolates it, right? And that thinking is flawed. And, the best example of this is, have you ever seen somebody take their squat from 135 to 405 for 5 and not get a bigger back, bigger, deeper hips, bigger legs? I sure as shit haven't. Now, people will point out that they'll point out that one guy that they know that looks like a beanpole that can lift a bunch of weight? Maybe me. And say, well, he's strong on the barbell lifts, but he doesn't look like he lifts. But then it's like, well, he's 6'4" and 220 and you're calling him skinny. Like, he's a big ass dude, so that doesn't hold up in practice. And just because there's one outlier doesn't mean that you can't talk about it for the whole entire population. So again, why would we not want to use those most efficient exercises? A lot of people argue that they're hard. You can get on a machine. You can get on a machine chest press. You can get on a hack squat. You can get on a back extension. You can just do the movement, not have to learn the skill of doing it. And that's great for lazy people who don't desire to acquire any movement skills. But for the rest of us that value strength and being able to actually move our body in the way that it's designed to move under load, we find that it is very useful to use the barbell lifts where you have to take advantage of all that. Now, the problem with something like a back extension compared to a deadlift, let's just do the one-to-one comparisons. Why would you not just do back extensions instead of the deadlift? Now, if you think about a 45-degree back extension and you reach down and you grab a stack of plates to lift it, number one, your grip is going to limit that movement at some point. There's machines for it, but again, if you got a strong deadlifter, he's probably going to max that machine out quickly, or he's going to be very limited in his grip. And it's not even a full movement pattern. The back extension, since there isn't any knee extension in a back extension, is more so like a RDL, where there's some stretch on the glutes and hamstrings. And a lot of it is they end up doing a flexion extension of the back along with it under load. So again, this is an exercise that you use less weight and arguably less range of motion to lift the most weight, because you are, flexing the back out and you are putting the glutes and hamstrings in a farther stretch. And if you know anything about muscle, muscle contractions, a muscle that's really stretched or really shortened doesn't produce as much force as the muscle that is in more optimal length. Okay, so basically you are not satisfying a bunch of the exercise selection criteria with a back extension. Utilize the most muscle mass. Well, in a deadlift, you're using your back, traps, upper back, all that to hold the load. Your lats help assist with keeping the bar over the midfoot and transfer the force. Your erectors hold your back in position. Your, glutes and hamstrings, adductors, those are all involved in the hip extension, along with your legs. Your quads are utilized in the deadlift to drive the bar off the floor. So there's a simultaneous hip and knee extension there with a rigid back, and all of that muscle mass is being used at once. Whereas a 45-degree back extension is a less weight, maybe some more range of motion on some of the muscle groups, but not all of them. So it's overall less effective, and it's going to get you less strong than if you can back extension. Now here's the kicker. The guy, the general population person, he walks into the gym and he does back extensions. And he starts with a body weight, and then he does a 25-pound plate, and he adds, eventually after about a year, he's up to holding, say, 90 pounds. So 2 45-pound plates on his back extension. And he thinks that's pretty good progress, but it's not near as much of a progress as a guy deadlifting for a year straight who could take his deadlift from nothing to 405 or better for 5 reps. And then any 500 plus pound deadlifter is going to be able to back extension a metric shit ton compared to the guy who just only ever did weighted back extensions. So a pendulum squat or a hack squat, let's use this example. Now the low bar squat, for instance, again, the bar is set low on your back and it requires you to utilize your hips more to overcome the load of the bar due to some moment arms. It puts a longer moment arm on the hips and a shorter one on the knees, okay? And it uses a simultaneous knee and hip extension. So your quads are extending at the same time your hips are extending, that hip drive out of the bottom, while your back is holding itself rigid and holding the bar on your back. So all of that muscle mass is being used at once to overcome the weight of the bar. Now we have a depth standard of the hip crease below the top of the knee. This ensures that the muscle mass goes through all the muscle mass you need to use, the quads, the glutes, the hamstrings, the adductors. All of those muscles are utilized in the most effective way possible. And this allows us to lift a bunch of weight. So the low bar squat out of any squat pattern allows you to lift the most weight, so you get stronger. Now let's use a hack squat, for instance. A hack squat, for the most part, people use for quad hypertrophy. Or it's going to have more knee flexion involved. And that means that the argument that people make is that the hack squat is better at quad hypertrophy because it isolates it than a barbell squat. And again, flawed thinking there, because why would the general person who values getting stronger efficiently want to use something that only really is focused on one muscle group, which would be the quads? So in a low bar squat, you're getting all the stimulus on quads. Maybe you're not getting quite as much range of motion on the quads, but you're getting a ton of stimulus on the glutes, the hamstrings, the adductors, and the back, all at once. Whereas the hack squat, since there's a bunch of support and the balance is taken care of, and the really the movement pattern itself is taken care of, you are able to focus more on just the quadriceps. So again, we are utilizing the most muscle mass with the longest range of motion, so we can lift the most weight, and thus we get stronger. Whereas the hack squat or the pendulum, you're just getting a bunch of quad involvement, okay? And the same thing applies on why would you use a bench press instead of a chest press? Bench, kind of a full body movement. When you take into effect the brace, the leg drive, the utilization of all of the chest muscles, the deltoid, the triceps, where a chest press machine, depending on which one you use, again, there's a bunch of different chest presses machines that vary, right? They vary in the degree at which or in grips and setup. So it's very difficult to tell which muscle mass is it using. Whereas we have a specific model for the bench press that is repeatable in every single gym that has a barbell and weights across the entire world and universe. Eventually, Elon Musk is going to have a bench press on Mars. It'd be kind of cool. I don't remember if the weights are heavier or lighter there. But anyway, so again, the bench press, it's infinitely loadable, whereas you might tap out your chest press machine. And you might not have a specific set range of motion on all the chest press machines that you use. So there is far, far more reasons to use the barbell lifts than there is those 3 lifts that guy talked about. Now, I'm not going to say that those exercises are terrible exercises. I do them all myself. However, I will firmly believe that building your base with those barbell lifts is going to make your isolation work that they're talking about here far more effective. And I firmly believe that you are handicapping yourself as a lifter and somebody trying to build muscle mass and strength if you take the case of doing the more optimal, more isolating movements like those than the actual heavy lifts, okay? So, as always, the message is build your base with the barbell and then utilize all of that strength that you build to make your accessory work, like hack squats, like back extensions, like, what was the other one? He was talking about chest press machines, that much more effective. And then you're going to become very, very well-rounded. Again, it's not a case of it being, can you do one or the other? It's what is going to be the most effective way to get you strong and build muscle mass that is going to be useful to you later on down the line when you can change your training goals. Okay? So, annoying question to me at first, however, a great question to ponder, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of an explanation on why we would want to use the barbell lifts over machines, especially initially early on. Now, again, if you're still here after that long 16-minute ramble, you're struggling with the barbell lifts. I work specifically with guys who want to get that right so they can build their base for the first time and move on with their lives and use that strength to pursue other endeavors. So if you're wanting to get your lifts right, if you're wanting to have that decision-making fatigue that you have on what program to do, when to make changes, if you want somebody to take care of that for you, that is what I'm here for, along with hammering down your form so you can be as efficient as possible with those lifts and you don't fall into the I've never been able to figure out how to squat category, thus it is a terrible movement, thus I should hack squat. So if you're wanting to work with me one-on-one, get over to gzstrength.com, scroll on down, fill out the application, and I will be in touch with you soon.